I have a special guest this week. I have Scott Manson, and man, you guys are gonna really get off on this. I mean, especially you hardcore guys that want to understand where the beginnings came from, a lot of different things. And Scott's going to go through like the history of Taddy from day one, you know, with Joey. And I was fortunate enough to be involved with,
Yeah, I need your
you know,
stories. That's
with,
what we really need. Yeah.
Taddy Shimizu and Billy and Jimmy and Joey, you know, as a kid. So, yeah, well, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about. So if you guys have any answers or questions, excuse me, feel free to shoot them in to Scott and I. But Scott's got the knowledge. He's, you know, and I'll let Scott tell you about the project he's doing right here.
Well, so yeah, that was, I am writing a history book. It's called A History of Tady Lures, and that's because there are many stories out there, but it's been a fun project. It's been a lot of work so far, but there's some cool stories, and you guys are going to dig the book. So yeah, I'm excited to talk a little bit about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, let's kind of start where you started from. You know, how the inception of it and how you started.
So I'm friends with Joey, and so I'm also a teacher, which is probably why I'm here. We're going to talk about kids today a little bit too. And so being a trained historian, these two worlds kind of collided. And you know, as I asked Joey questions like, oh, he doesn't know, or there's rumors, or the old guys know, that kind of thing. So it just started intriguing me, started collecting slowly like some of the rare jigs, and then I just kept bugging Joey about it a little bit here and there. And initially, I don't know if he was all that into the project, but I think he's bought in now. Yeah, I think.
Oh, what a winner! I mean, because my history goes back with him too.
Well, and yeah, and as I was saying earlier, we're losing our history. And the stuff from the 50s, as far as jigs, if you had to tell that story now, I don't know that you could. There are a few guys out there that know some stuff, but I think that generation of jig stories might be gone. It'd be really hard to do. There are some guys that know some stuff, but even the stories I'm trying to tell from Taddy starting in 60s, I still have 5 or 6 big questions that I still have 20 big names that I need to interview and things like that. So I'm hoping that these guys can kind of bridge the gap, but deciphering between legend, lore, and what is truth. You know, I call Joey all the time, and I'm like, hey, he's like, oh God, like, you know, because it's like there are these rumors out there, but where do these rumors come from, and is the truth behind them? And I need multiple people to confirm this stuff as I'm going through this. So it's a fun project. It's way bigger than I ever thought. I thought I was going to do a magazine, like a picture book type of a magazine.
Right.
It's now going to be a full-on coffee book, table, massive. And the stuff that's going to be in it is epic. Like the stuff that I've found, awesome. And like people won't be ready for what they're going to see in the book.
They're going to love that. You know, I could tell you some of the history from my standpoint right here at 22nd Street. I mean, if you walk down the dock, you know, 100 yards, the Mustang was out there, and I can remember, this is one story, Taddy would always come down to give us our 6-packs. And they're not the beer, guys. They were much better than beer. These things were packages of jigs. And he would come back with any new colors or anything and hand them off, come bring it down to the boat, and then we go out and we did all the...
These are the flat metal jigs, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, like the 45s,
oh, okay.
The 9s. Like we did a lot in the spring. We did a lot of fishing with light line, throwing light iron, you know, 20-pound with the Taddy 9 lights. And we would slay them. And not small fish either. You know, we were getting a lot of the really nice calicos with the Net Clemente.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but it was awesome having Billy and Taddy coming down.
Yes.
Billy was still into a lot of fishing, which was great. Taddy wasn't doing that much fishing at that point. But, you know, he was just the big prize. You know, here's Taddy Shimizu. You know, here's the guy that innovated Tady Lures and got everything going, and you know the rich history of that.
It's cool, yeah, and I'm even going back into the history as far as internment and going back even further to kind of build in that and showing some historical documents from even before. So as much as I want to focus on the jig, the history person in me wants to like tell the full story.
Absolutely. I think that's a lot of our story, you know, in general, the Japanese American fishermen, you know.
Yes.
That's how it evolved from
Absolutely.
Margaret. But I mean, it goes back one generation to my grandparents in Hilo, you know, my grandfather had a great-grandfather had a fishing fleet there. And so it came across the pond, and I fished with them from the time I was 4 years old. So I was very blessed. And my grandfather was one of those innovative anglers. I still have his real deal in the box, which is now sitting at the Taddy Museum. You may have seen it, but I mean.
And what's really cool about this
Yeah.
is I think Joey is like in on the Taddy Museum now too.
Oh,
I
that's
think like
awesome.
he's
I
kind of
believe
like,
it.
yeah,
Absolutely.
like and I always tell people, because parents come to me at back to school night and they'll be like, man, when I was in school, I hated history, but now I can't get enough of it. And I tell them the same thing. I'm like, in order to like history, you have to have a little bit of it first. And because when you're 17, 18, and Joey's a younger guy in the industry as well, you're a businessman, the history, but once you have a little bit and you look back and you can kind of start to respect that. So I think it's a good time for him and a good time for us. And I think a lot of people are jonesing for this history. I think the Michael Folks project the videos are going to be epic. I've heard some other projects that are going on. So hopefully because to me, this is not me, an individual writing this book. It's quickly become a community project. Because I need you, I need the Wayne Allens, I need the Bob Tuttles, I need the, all the guys, because I don't know this stuff. I also don't have these jigs. These guys have all the stories, have all the jigs. So and it went from a community book to really a family book. Because yes, Joey's family, and yes, it's about his family, but this community, this jig fishing community that's also collecting these for whatever reason, like why did these guys hold on to these jigs? It's become a tight-knit family group, and yes, I'll be the one that writes it, but I can't do it without these guys.
Oh, absolutely. One of my things to pay it back was to go through and pick out all my old putters, schnabels, Clydes, and everything, and give all Joey my unique stuff too,
Yeah.
to hang in his museum, because his grandfather gave me everything I ever needed, and Jimmy and Billy, all of them did. But I mean, that's what makes the story so funny, is that we had such a close tie to that. But,
And everybody that wants to talk Taddy with me, they all share the same story. I was this years old, a little guy, and he came on with a bucket, and he handed me, and people would be like, I still have it at home. My very first, Taddy 1 or Go-Go or whatever jig was given to him at that point. And so he, legendary reputation of just being so... Here you go. But
that's
what we all needed. When I think about the first time I started throwing iron, it was somebody that handed me one and said, try this.
Smart way, let me tell you.
Oh, no, and it changed me forever. I was like, I can still remember mine. Sorry, Joey, it wasn't a Taddy. It was a UFO. But I won't forget that.
Well, Scott, everything, like you said, it all works hand in hand, because we come out of a society, and I mentioned this before, but in Southern Cal, we got aerospace, we got Disney, we got JPL. Our fishermen, they're not ordinary fishermen. I dealt with fishermen around the world and around the country. There's some, like I would say in Japan, there's some very astute fishermen there too. They get into their detailed things like we do. But as a whole, for this country, nothing comes close to Southern California, because we're aerospace based, Disneyland, JPL. I mean, our society is based on higher technology than pretty much anything around, and we have innovators.
Yeah.
We're not going to settle for something like piece of metal with 2 holes in it and a treble hook on the end. No, we want it to swim like this. We want it to do that. You want one to sink out that we can yo-yo. Who knew what a yo-yo was? But I mean, so when you cover the water column with jigs that swim differently, for different purposes, that comes out of our society, which we can credit all our fishermen for,
Yeah, no, and me as a history teacher, I'm
Yeah.
thinking post-World War
absolutely.
II and everything that comes in with aerospace, Lakewood and Long Beach and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So, yes, and I enjoy teaching all of that, but the book should be fun.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start digging in the pile. I still got, I don't know how many, probably another 100, 200 pounds of jigs in the big stack boxes. They're too heavy to even lift.
I will make that plea to anybody that's listening. If you know a Taddy story, find me on Facebook, Scott Manson. You can find me in the jig groups, all that kind of stuff. If you have a rare jig, I don't need it necessarily. I just need to come to your house and photograph it for 30 seconds. So it should be in the book, or if you have an old photograph, anything like that, because we need to save this history. And I'm trying to do this book the right way. I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know there's going to be an edition too. But if you have anything, please reach out.
Oh, that's awesome. Like in my instance, you know, I feel it's painted back anyway because it was Taddy and Billy, Jimmy all these years, and Joey now too. They've come down, supplied, and I never had to, you know, and that's why I basically used straight Taddy jigs the whole time because I had everything I need. If I didn't, Jimmy would tweak it. I'll give you an example. I rep Spro Gamakatsu, and they have these inline swivels, okay? And I wanted Jimmy, he welded up these inline swivels. I think you've seen them, the Spros, I think they're 220 pounds.
Yep.
Now you, even with mono on it, when you put that little swivel, which is about that big, on that thing, okay, it does two things. When you hook a yellow and it starts turning and twisting, it takes all the torque out of it because it will spin, you know, so it's not going to torque the hook. Whereas if it was locked in and welded tight, it's going to come up against that welded ring and lock up, and you could torque it, right, and pop it out possibly. So this thing spun. But we also found out by accident, by doing that, it kicked better. It kicked like it was wired. So I didn't tell anybody, but we did a whole bunch, and then after a while, I had Jimmy. All my 45 surface stuff was all done that way. So.
And yeah, if we want to get into jig fishing techniques, I fish a clip now and have for a few years. I think the clip, if you know those paper clips that you're throwing on the end, it gives the jig that extra room because you're not tight and tight. It gives it that extra point too. Like if just that point that you're making, there's an extra point there that's giving it that extra kick. Right. So yeah, we could do jig fishing talks all day.
Oh yeah.
Just a couple questions.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's stacking up, huh? Yeah.
Dan Smith just wants to say hi. It's great to be here with you all. Albert Pont says hello to everybody that's here. Isaac, good evening, gentlemen. Charles Zimmer, Danny, thank you for inspiring kids last week. And you were hot on the trout.
Yeah, I got lucky.
That was great. And Current Jam, I'm new to heavy metals. Coming from New York where bucktails are treasured. Looking forward to trying out some iron in San Diego. And Mike Trunk can't wait for albacore. Go ahead, guys.
Joey has been awesome to, so if you guys don't know, I'm on the Orange County CCA board. I run their social media. So if you follow Orange County CCA on Instagram, or if you're in our group on Facebook, I run that. And so every time CCA asks Joey for something, he's always donated. I also run a fishing camp at my school. Joey donated to that. So Taddy definitely has a reputation of always being great with kids and when people ask, and he's been great with me.
Even with me too, all these years on the American Angler, he's one of the co-sponsors. They've always been, you know, from back at Taddy himself to his dad, Jimmy, and Billy, they've all been so generous. And they co-sponsor my trip.
Since you mentioned Billy, everybody I talk to talks about what a great angler he was.
Oh.
Like, people will be like, man, you want to see someone that was a skilled angler.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, excited to tell his story, too.
Yep. Yeah, no, Billy was awesome. He was a great fisherman. And he was very subtle about it, too. It wasn't no flash. He was just good, really good. But he was always on, you know. You know.
Love that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Yeah, there's some great history there, Scott. I don't even know where to start. I'm gonna have to sketch it out.
Yeah, no, I don't want to give anything away because I need you guys to buy the book. Otherwise, I'm going broke buying the jigs right now. But it's been fun. Yeah, I've found myself the last few weekends at swap meets at 5 o'clock in the morning and things like that, like going out and I think so. I don't know if I'm allowed to give this. So we're at like 150 jigs total. And I'm not talking variations of jigs. I'm talking like 150. And I'm not talking heavy versus light. I'm talking 150. So I'm missing at this point just less than 10 as far as being able to photograph. And I think I know guys that have the fill-in 10.
Yeah.
I'd like them for myself too, because my hope is when the book gets done that I'm able to take the book and the jigs on the road and be like, here they are.
Wow.
So
Do a road show with it, huh?
yeah, go to
that'd
clubs,
be
go to the,
awesome.
that kind of
Yeah.
thing, and have the jigs on the wall
Oh, that's
behind you,
cool.
and you're like, hey,
That's
pull
awesome.
out whatever. Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you gone through the wall at Taddy?
Oh yeah.
Like Phil and we're going to go up there? Okay, so like I said, pretty much everything they had,
Yep. Yeah.
Jimmy
But
gave me.
between Joey and I, we're close.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's
yeah,
good.
yeah. No, his
That's great.
that wall definitely. Well, and that's why this book is going to have things that nobody has ever seen before, because
so cool.
yeah, the prototypes that never came out, the stuff that never came out, the documents, all that. It's going to have that kind of stuff. So
Well,
I think people are gonna love it.
You know, it was a killer, Scott. It was their prototypes that I had at one point, and after you hook a fish on it, you go, oh, wait a second, that can't be replaced. So you retire it. Now, what good is that,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, here's something that catches fish, catches fish, but you don't want to use it again because it's the only one.
yeah.
You
Always
gotta-
difficult when you have a good swimming jig.
Right.
You want to keep it forever, but you also start to get a little bit tight with it. Like, do I really want to throw it by those rocks? Even
Yeah.
though, yes, you start to realize like this jig has become a part of me. Like I don't want to lose it.
Oh,
I've lost 2 jigs, like important jigs in my life. One of them sitting at Cedros Island, the other one sitting in the middle of the Sea of Cortez. I can tell you the exact spot where both of them are because it hurt.
Oh, it hurt.
It
yeah.
hurt.
Ingrained in you.
Yes, both Taddy
Oh, my
45s,
God.
one in white and one a gold and red.
Mint and white.
Yeah.
Mustang green.
Yep. Another story
Yeah.
for the book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no, it was unbelievable. Even prior to the Mustang, what we would do is a lot of times we were when we're doing boat work in the spring before we're getting the boat ready to go down to San Diego, we would shoot the engine, clean the engines too. And we'd shoot it. It was Detroit diesel green, which is a little darker,
Yeah, yeah.
more opaque green, But we would do that. We'd just take our beat up 45s and we'd just shoot them with the page, whatever, and it would work. But then when we started shooting with the linear polyurethane, and we had the mint green, oh, man, that thing just killed right off the bat. We go, well, this is something I told Jimmy, I says, Jimmy, this is it.
A guy I'm interviewing this weekend is flying in from Denver for the interview, and he's the guy who came up with the wounded soldier. And he told me the story originally, and I was like, oh gosh, because how many people have told me they're the
Army
ones that
green
invented.
with the red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I mentioned his name to Jeff, who had worked at the tackle store
Yeah.
from 79 to 84, and I didn't say anything. He goes, oh, that's the guy that invented the wounded soldier. And I'm like, yes. Because this book is, again, I have to be able to confirm
Confirmation.
everything that people are telling me.
Absolutely.
And so when I get it, it's exciting because it can go in the book
Sure.
now.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Yeah. Man, oh man. There's absolutely no end to the history on that.
No, and we need to do a better job of saving all of it.
And we're in the right position for that because we have the people that really they can appreciate that.
Yeah,
information.
no,
They know
I
what
think the fishing community is ready for it. I think it's something we've kind of missed or lacked, and I think there's some projects that are going to be coming out in the next year or two that I think we're all going to be really happy about.
Well, and that's what Southern Cal fishing is all about. It's about the innovations, and coming out of the people that were doing. And I told this story many times with Phil. With grills, I just could never settle. And when Penn said, plastic spool, metal spools, all you're going to get, we sell everything we make. We're not changing anything for you. Look what Southern Cal did. Look, Carl Newell. You start naming off guys that changed the industry because they took Russ Iser with Spectra. Oh, you never use that stuff. I had captains.
I remember.
I never used that stuff. Oh, really? Okay. Now knowing me, the smart aleck I am, I go back there. I go, hey, it's kind of nice not having to throw a rod and reel over with a clip or chasing it down in a skip anymore. And they'd always give me those, shut up, Kadota. But I do remember that, and you have to give credit where credit's due. And we had those people like Russ Iser, and all these innovators.
Yeah.
So that's
And
what
we should
makes,
celebrate them. We should.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
what makes Southern Cal what Southern Cal is.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
I said, I credit the society we come from. We have the mindset of the consumers and our fishermen is when I go around the country and fish around the country, it's not even close. And I'm not being arrogant about it. I look and they're the only people that I know that are very astute about the technical things are the in-fisherman guys, the Linder family.
Yeah.
Al and
Yep.
Jimmy and all
I
those
watched
guys. They came out and
all those shows growing up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those guys did their homework. And all the different TV shows that I did over the years with all those guys, the Rollins and you know, you name it, Jose Wahebe and all these
Yeah, yeah.
guys. It was the in-fisherman guys that did more homework about Castaic, about the fishery, about the history, about the techniques. And I see a close parallel the way the Southern Cal guys and the guys that fish in the Midwest, upper Midwest, very similar technique-wise. It's more finesse lines, you know, where you get into the South. And it's so funny, if you go halfway up our state, you go fish the Delta and stuff, these guys are fishing like the guys in Texas and the rest of the country. So it's a split market, you know, where
Yeah, yeah.
it's two different fisheries essentially, you know. But when you find a group of people that gravitate and have that mentality that's very similar to ours, which were the in-fisherman guys, it's really cool to see.
To me, this is the rabbit hole. And when you are passionate, you are going to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're here to talk about today is kids in our society today and not having a rabbit hole.
That is huge.
They're not given the stuff that we were given as kids, as far as my parents had me on baseball teams and soccer teams, and I had never had enough time to do all the things I wanted to do because my parents gave me all these hobbies. And our kids today don't have that rabbit hole to go chase. They don't have that passion. One of the questions I ask my kids is, what's their why? Like why? Like what's your purpose? If you retired tomorrow, what would you do with the rest of your life? And yeah, they're 16, so they have some time to figure it out, but they don't have the hobbies that we did as kids. And that's something that's missing in today's society. Speaking as kids real quick, I have to give Phil a shout out because my parents, I grew up poor. My fishing was on piers and beaches, and my parents once a year would let me go on a 3/4 day, half-day trip. I was a fisherman that learned how to fish in books and movies. And this guy's movies are things I watched until they broke. And I'm not joking. And then when Inside Sport Fishing came out, it was another access for me. But like, I think for a lot of people that didn't have the money, the videos that this guy made, that's how I learned how to fish.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, a couple guys want to say,
Yeah, go
Jason
ahead. Keep
Lawler
us-
says, hello, guys. Steve Din says, hope you guys are all having a nice day. Speaking of kids, Danny, you are highly involved in getting kids fishing. And Scott, I've heard
absolutely.
what you were talking about before the show, and man, it couldn't be more current and more pertinent and more really relevant to what's happening now. Kids need the outdoors and they're not getting it.
100%. If you guys don't know, if you don't have kids, we have a mental health crisis like that's happening. These kids, we don't know what happened. So COVID happened. The kid that came back from COVID is not the same and has not been the same for a couple years. Anxiety levels are way up. Depression is up. Fights on all campuses across America are through the roof. And we don't know necessarily what caused this. We know COVID, staying home, not having your friends. We also know that social media played a big part because these kids are just on their phones. And that's because they're not outside. They're not playing sports anymore. They're not playing with their friends in neighborhoods. You don't see roving packs of kids and bicycles all over neighborhoods anymore. And I think we need to give these kids help. Our kids today know, like they know to come up to me, Mr. Manson, I'm having an anxiety attack. Okay, you know that you're having one, but we never say like, what can we do like beforehand to like stop all this stuff? And to me, it's the answer that you had as a kid and you had as a kid and I did. We went fishing. We were outdoors. We were always busy doing stuff. And we have to help these kids because they're going to become adults. And those adults are going to do what with this anxiety and depression and whatever. And a good way out is also a way out that can save our industry. And that is that we all have to dig in and get these kids fishing.
Oh, I agree 100%. You know, I mean, fishing is what saved me. You know, as a young kid, I used to get into a lot of fights, you know, and then I would catch it from my father. I mean, there was heck to pay for that, you know. And so he knew that I loved to fish. And I don't want to bore you guys, but I told the story before. I mean, that's what they dangled in front of me for my grades. And you know, if I stayed out of trouble, that was first and foremost. But so if on Thursday night, my grandfather would call my dad, say, well, how'd he do? And he said, oh, he did great. His grade's good. He didn't get any trouble, no fights, blah, 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 blah. Friday, Grandpa would come pick me up. And I told the story before, we'd go fishing somewhere different almost every Saturday. But he would do his homework, and that's what I'd learned from him, you know.
There has to be a
Yeah.
dangle.
That was it.
We don't have that with the kids right now because
Yeah.
what is the dangle? Video games at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
And as I was
That's
telling
killer.
you, during COVID, all teachers noticed that we were getting assignments at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock in the morning turned in. So they're not sleeping, way too much screen time during COVID, and now the cell phone has become way too big. We know from the reports of Facebook and Instagram that if you're over a half an hour on TikTok or whatever, that it's not doing good to your brain.
Oh, jeez.
Um,
It's amazing.
And so there needs to be limits on that stuff, but they also have to have an alternative. And the alternative for us was to walk to the local lake or, get dropped off at the pier and these kids need help finding that.
Well, funny you should say that. We just finished doing that this weekend, at Santa Ana River Lakes. And, hopefully, we'll take baby steps and all these, but another way that you could do it very inexpensively, and it fills into that too, is doing the surf fishing deal, which you can do at your own time, your own pace, the different levels. I mean, it's like any level within fishing. You could start at a beginner's outfit to see how it goes. If you don't like it, well, okay, you don't have a lot invested there. But I mean, hopefully what you're going to do is escalate till they get hooked.
We have to throw
Yeah.
more stuff at these kids.
Yeah.
And fishing is one of the
Absolutely.
things that we need to throw
Yep.
at them because, again, you're not inside, you're not on a screen,
Yeah.
you're outdoors, breathing fresh air. So we need to do way more camps. So I work with CCA, we do some kids stuff. I've volunteered for the IGFA kids things that they do. I run a camp at my school where we do a week-long kind of boot camp in the summer, and then we take them on a half day. And then we took them surf fishing last year too. All industries, Dana Point does a great job of having that week-long fishing camp that they do for kids. Like every landing needs to do something like that. All industries need to sponsor something like that because it's going to do two things. It's going to save these kids. It's going to save our future, but it's also going to help our industry.
I agree 100%. We talked about this before. I think I may have somebody that can, a few people that can very, very well help out with all that, and help sponsor a lot of that stuff. And, I would put these mandates on the kids too, particularly because I come from the sport fishing
Right.
industry. Okay. I was very strict with my crew too. There was, before it was even mentioned, we were always a zero tolerance boat, and I was strict, what can I tell you? But I think that's the only way you can be. I mean, you got people's lives at stake, and very blessed by having the crews that we've had over time, and that helped, the progression of keeping those crews coming like that. So you start, bringing in the cream of the crop. Well, that makes you look good too, So it's a twofold deal, which is great.
They need somebody to look up to. These kids need mentors more than ever right now, not just mom and dad, but outsiders that are truly teaching them the right way to live
Right.
life.
And they live, yeah, right. And they live a certain lifestyle.
Yeah.
And there's, with me, there's no gray area. It's black and white. It's a zero tolerance deal. And I try to tell these kids too. I says, listen, I'll help you. They're implementing programs now, which we're going to institute too, as far as being able to start, say, like in 10th grade and work on if they can get their time together, but work on the rules of the road, get it to where by the time you're 18, you could sit for your ticket and have a 100-ton license. Now, if you're not a fisherman, you could still implement it with running a tug or a crew boat, or get you into the industry. It'll get you a vocation that way too. But for those of us that love fishing, that's not even work, Scott. I mean, we're doing that. That's our passion. So for me, it wasn't work.
Right.
The hours, 20 hours a day, didn't bother me. Might have got 2 hours here, 3 and 1, or whatever, 2 and 2. But because it was fishing, I could constantly be pumped, and I didn't need a drug. The adrenaline came out of my fishing.
Yeah.
And excitement for fishing. So, I think we may have a very good avenue to.
Yeah, we just got to keep pushing this.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% on that.
Hey, Scott, Dan
Yeah.
Smith wants to know, do you think it's possible that CCA could have a youth fishing club every chapter of it? Is that a possibility?
I love that idea, and I love to hear that too, because
That's a great
CCA, like our chapters, are all wanting to hear from our members. What do you want from us? CCA Orange County would love to hear from, and I don't know what city you're in, but I think that would be the next step for this. And the different companies that have the GROM programs and things like that, like every company needs something like that, and I think CCA would be a great avenue to have kids be part of that, a youth club. I love it.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I've been blessed to have a background and started with trout fishing, walking the Sierra streams, but then got gravitated into bass, well, saltwater, obviously. But, to even break it down to where, you could have a surf fishing club. I mean, well, you could have the different divisions within the CCA that, we'll bring in specialists, and we have guys that can volunteer their
Just
time.
the
that are
meetups,
great. Yeah.
and we talked, where are the pinheads today? Like, it doesn't happen. Why? Where'd they go?
That's
What
right.
stopped it?
That's right.
Where are the kids that are crawling the rocks and the docks? Like I have one every single year, but 10, 20 years ago, I used to have piles of kids that were like coming in every day showing me, we snuck into this golf course last night. Look at these bass that we caught.
love it.
I'm like, hey, they're like, would you go with us? I'm like, no. Can you imagine? Like, teacher gets caught trespassing on golf course.
Would that be Los Alamitos golf course?
yeah.
There's a few of them, but no,
There are.
not that I know.
Hey, I did the golf course thing as a kid too, but we had a quarry by my house, Villa Park, California.
Yeah.
And it was definitely illegal to fish in there, and I got caught by the cops.
Oh wait,
all
is that
time.
the overflow from Irvine?
Yeah.
The Dave Noyes, who ran Irvine Lake, gives me a call one day. Says they're going to be draining the lower Afterby there, and he goes, I don't know if there's any fish in there, right? So we go down there in the afternoon. Rick Grover, Angler's Marine, there's a bunch of us that went in. I think we had about 3 boats, and I think we had a couple hundred fish the first time. So we said, yeah, I guess there's a few fish in here, right? And so we would invite different dealers. And I can remember I took Jim Miltenberger, who owned Fisherman's Hardware in Huntington Beach, right? So I'm showing up late off some appointments, and I pull in. There's a launch ramp there by the dam, and Jimmy's got his boat. He has a Ranger. He's got it sitting by the water. He's going to wait for me to get there. And as I'm walking down the ramp, he hooks a fish, huge fish, rolls, and I could see it. I'm going, that's over 10. It goes, zzz, comes off. Well, when they finally got the water down low enough, they netted all these fish, and they took it down to, I think it was Skinner, and they took all these fish and transferred them in there. But they netted a 12-pound, and it had to be the one that Jimmy hooked, But, it's amazing because the first time we were in there, I was Rick Grover of Angler's Marine, and he was with Kay. But we're trolling along, we're puttering on the trolling motor, and I look at this bait that's hanging up above a branch. So I said, pull in there. I grab the bait, I go, let me tell you something. You got a high-end poacher here. I said, this is a megabass. This is a $20-something bait, guys. And they go, you're kidding. I go, no, it's a megabass. So I says, you got a great grade of poachers here, But, it just goes to show, but that, when kids love doing that.
I remember it being illegal, and I remember my mom talking to, because we had a couple guys that would all go down there together. And I remember one of the other moms, and she said, you know what, I grew up in, and I'll get the state, it was like Iowa or whatever, and we were allowed to do whatever we wanted to. And she's like, my son doesn't get that, so you know what, he's allowed to go down there. And because the cops just kicked us out, when you're young, they don't.
Which is great, yeah.
But yeah, those are good memories.
Oh yeah, no, we were blessed. I got to fish about three or four times, and it was just phenomenal. Yeah. But,
all right, well, there's a whole bunch of guys who love the CCA idea. Steve Din says, join CCA, be a cool person. Brett Ender loves the CCA kids idea. Mike Trunk says, I'm afraid that Luke Burson's mustache would scare the kids. Travis Bright, you can't even find kids playing baseball at parks anymore. And Jeff Yeomans wants an update on the bluefin and one-day range of Point Loma. The San Diego had 26 fish today, and we were calling that last night on our live show last night. There's a lot of fish in one-day range. Those full-day boats that leave in the morning, come back in the afternoon, are getting a piece of it, so it sounds really, really good. And Steve Bermuda says, Hello, and great choice in topics. Danny Kadota, that's all you.
And I'll say to Mike Trunk, yes, Luke Burson is my boss at CCA Orange County. That mustache scares me. And Travis, I'll give you a story. So at the high school that I teach at, I used to run the girls soccer program on the boy side now. We used to get 60 girls, 50 girls every year to tryouts. Last year I was at the girls tryout, 1 girl showed up.
Wow.
Wow.
So think about where did these kids go? What are they doing? And so yes, and I knew that football numbers are way down. Schools are closing football programs, and I always thought, oh, parents don't want. No, programs are down across the board. Our baseball team at our school is famous, and they used to cut 20, 30, 40. They don't cut anymore. Like, you show up, you play, because
Wow.
and what happened?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
come kids aren't playing anymore? And that's the real problem too. What we know about play and what it does for your brain and what it does for your problem solving and your growth and all of that, and we're not doing that anymore. And we're replacing that with a screen.
Scott, that's what kept me out of trouble. It was that carrot that dangled over my head for grades and more so at my young age for behavior.
Yeah.
But then they gravitated into grades, and that's
I-
inevitably got me into UC San Diego. But
I love the carrot idea
You
because
know.
to me the carrot can be fishing, and really
Oh.
you just want to expose your kids to everything. If
Yeah.
soccer doesn't stick, if this doesn't stick, if
Right.
this doesn't stick,
Right.
fishing is something that you're outside.
Yep.
My parents did an awesome job, and again I told you we didn't have much money, but every vacation we went on, we were camping at San Clemente, and I got to fish for 7 days in a row. We went to Avila, and they put me on the half day and the 3/4 day boat.
my
All of
God.
our vacations, June Lake, everything we did as a kid, we
had
went
access to
fishing.
fish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they knew this is their thing, and they're outdoors, and they're not doing bad
Yep.
things. And
Yep. No, I agree. I was blessed to fish with my grandparents every single weekend. And that's what kept me out of trouble, because I love to fish more than getting in trouble. And I used to get in a lot of trouble, but I love to fish more than that. So that's saying something.
And I just want to give a shout out
Yeah.
to Friends of Rollo, because my trip, so my summer camp that I take my kids on, they granted me, they're going to pay for the boat to take my kids out. So 30 kids are going to go fish
Oh,
this
that's
summer.
awesome.
And,
That's awesome.
So last year I did this camp. I did 2 days at school. Iserline showed up, taught them all how to do knots. CCA was there showing them how to cast. And so we went on the boat, half-day boat, and we killed the sculpin, and then we caught barracuda, calico, everything. And so I was in the parking lot kind of, cleaning up, and this mom comes up to me and she's like, my son told me that he caught 20 fish today. He's lying to me. And I was like, no, your son caught 20 fish. And I showed her my phone, and I have all the pictures to show you. And she's like, okay, how do we do this again? And I'm like, well, you're in the parking lot. You just need to call or go over there, because she had 2 twin, he had little brothers. Get the family set up. But I don't think a lot of these families know that this stuff exists.
Wow.
Because they didn't do it or whatever it is. So we have to reach these kids so that they just getting them to the landing, showing them how to get on the boat. There were people that are going to follow that.
That's a great take. Phil, we need to do that.
Yeah,
We'll
absolutely.
just run it through, and we'll stage one here, or maybe not stage, we'll actually do one. What the heck? But it's a huge deal. Like Scott sees it in school, but you see so much of this and so much, and you know what? Instead of that, I'd rather see that. That.
Sergio has
Okay.
a famous line, no, don't buy him an Xbox, buy him a tackle box.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a kid that wasn't fishing a lot, my afternoons I would sometimes just reorganize my tackle box, because that was fun.
Yeah, or polish it, clean it, shine it up, But no, and Phil, I think in many different aspects, and you had mentioned too, with the diversity, do park programs. I could help teach them simple bass fishing, trout fishing. Pretty much. I hate to say it, I even fly fish, guys. And it's not just the feminine side of me, but
I don't think it's
actually
feminine at
got it.
all. I've got some buddies that are
I joke with
hardcore.
guys.
Yeah.
I joke with
just-
them because they're pretty, a lot of them are such purists, and I jump on them because of that. I think they need to have that open mind. It makes them a better fisher.
I say no to it because I do not need another rabbit hole. Like I have too many rabbit holes as is,
Yeah.
and that brings us back to like passions, right? Like
Yeah.
just you have so many passions that you're keeping yourself busy all the time, and these kids need more options.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and you got to keep your, you got to keep your mind open for doing those different things too. I mean, I was blessed enough at one time. I can remember one of the first show I shot with Dan Hernandez. I flew Gary Loomis down and his nephew Bobby Loomis, and a couple of pro staffers. I think Ben Sechrist, Greg Stosberry, they were all on the boat with us, right? And we got into a stop on the Yellowfin where we got them. We went from lift poles, started out with rod and reel. Then it got so good, I brought out some lift poles so they could do that. So it was probably some of the first lift poling on a sport boat that was ever done. I went from lift boats to one of the last things I did was I rolled cast a 14-weight fly rod and nailed the yellowfin on the fly right there. So I mean, look at the span from lift pole to fly and everything else in between. So there's so much you can do, given a bite like that. But I mean, just in general, you could focus it on different things, like from surf, which is very inexpensive to do. And get them started on that. Fish in the parks, like you said. If they have access to going up the Sierras in the summertime.
So you said Ben Sechrist's name. So I'm at Corona Del Mar one day as a kid. I think I'm 12, 13.
Yeah.
And I watched a boat hang a left out of Newport and come and fish those rocks in Corona Del Mar, right?
Yeah.
And so my 12-year-old self says, nah, if I had a boat, I would go deep, right? So I'm watching and he's throwing into the rocks and I realized I could climb on those rocks and cast into where he can't get into. Next time we went down, I had colored my own lead heads, because, like just filling it all in. And I threw into those rocks and caught calicos, and it's because of Ben Sechrist. So there's lots of options out there.
I was blessed to fish with Ben and Greg. And those guys, they were the best, when it came in short. And just on some of the spots that I did more of my fishing locally up here, for calicos, the wall and stuff like that, night fishing the wall.
Yeah.
But, when I went down to Newport and to Dana with
Yeah.
Ben and Greg, they had it wired to
And
where.
back then you could fish Laguna.
Oh, yeah. And, we went in there one time, we did a tournament, only having the knowledge of the spots that Ben and Greg did. And we took a fifth, not knowing squat, really, just by fishing with Ben and Greg showed me,
Yeah.
So they're amazing guys, both
Dan
those two.
Smith says, I know Kim and I say this every show, but man, oh man, we love this show. Thank you, Scott, Danny, and Phil. Great topic, guys. You guys are doing fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Speaking of this inshore stuff, we have some awesome captains on our coast in Benny Florentino, Jimmy Decker, Jerry Mayhew. If you are a calico guy and want to fish all these spots tight, even if you own your own boat, go out with each one of those guys and watch how they set up on points differently. It's really cool for me because I get to fish with all of them, and your knowledge, because you're watching them,
Absolutely.
and you're not even ready the first couple times you hang out with them to ask the right questions because you don't know why they stopped on this spot or that spot. But a couple times with each of them, and you'll be dialed in.
It's
This is unique, right? Like,
Oh,
where else
very
could you
much.
get a Benny Florentino or a Decker or a Jerry Mayhew in, name
Yeah,
the
yeah.
and it's a cool experience.
Well, and back then it was Benny, Greg, Stosberry,
Right,
those guys. And I can remember going with Ben and his dad, father, and we're fishing in the kelp. No, so Benny didn't tell me this, but if I brought a flipping reel, I would have killed him. So we're flipping in the kelp, thick kelp,
Right.
and I'm getting bit. By the time I get it in gear, I miss the fish.
Back
And
then,
Ben's
yeah.
just going, and he's on. And I look, he had a flipping reel. I says, you blankety blank. He didn't tell me, and he just started laughing. But, these are the things that you learn when you go fishing. And so, for part of that arsenal, when you are flipping in the kelp, a flipping reel, right? It sinks, and you just put your finger off the lever, and it's engaged. Where before, I'm sinking it out, and then I got to click it over. By that time, it spits it. So these things you learn from
And you're back on
experience.
mono on those days, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
you really didn't
Yeah,
feel the
now
bite
it's even
until
different.
now
Yeah.
you're on Spectra and
Yeah,
you feel
yeah.
it instantly.
Yeah.
And it,
Oh,
yeah.
you'd feel the bite, but it was not like Spectra.
Yeah.
Right, right. So yeah, there's something to be learned every single time.
And we have a lot of cool teachers on our coast. I think Benny Florentino is a premier teacher. Like if you have a kid, like this would be a way to do it. You know, you don't want to go on a party boat. You know, Jerry Mayhew is an awesome teacher, and he'd be pumped to help your child out. You know, if you wanted
That's
to rent those
awesome.
guys for the day.
That's what it takes.
Because the half day can be a little bit intimidating, right? Like you've done that. How much help am I going to get? Like my kid's over here, that kind of thing. Whereas if you really wanted to get your kid dialed in, we got some really good guys on this coast that could teach them.
And you know, it's changed. Etiquette's changed. When I grew up, they had what was called stern hogs. There were guys who were sitting locked on the on the rail like this, and I can remember hooking a tail, and I'm saying, excuse me," and they go, "This is my spot," and I couldn't go. You know, they wouldn't let me down the rail. So you know, like it was fortunate I was in high school. And so I dropped my shoulder, and I was a pulling guard at Dorsey. And I, with my fish, I moved them aside.
Yeah.
A little more abruptly than they wanted, but you know, I asked them very nicely to start. But I mean, that was really party boat fishing at that time, and it was rough and tough. But you know, that it's different now. You know, there's a lot more. I mean, the courtesy is much greater on the boats now, and you're going to get help from the crew, and you know, it's just different. It's not like, you know, back then. It was major tough.
Combat fishing.
Combat
yeah.
fishing, major tough.
Hey guys, Mark says, good to hear this conversation about today's youth. I think part of the problem has to do with today's types of parents. What I mean is, they're addicted to their phones and video games like the kids are.
Yeah, no, and you know, if you saw that, so those internal documents that were like released from Instagram about the damage that it does to girls and the depression that it causes and the lack of confidence and all those kind of things, when you see that and you see the kids, that's all they're doing, and they're looking at this and they're comparing that to who they are and they're, all that stuff that comes up, we have to limit that.
Yeah.
And the research says anything more than a half an hour a day. Well, I can tell you that my kids go home. They don't go outside. They're not hiking. Yesterday I told them, I'm like, guys, it's going to be 80 degrees this weekend. Who's going hiking? No, we're going to be on YouTube. We're going to be on, YouTube's a good thing. But there's a limit to everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there just isn't any exploration time for them. And to me, fishing could be a huge problem solver to this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why I snuck a lot of those 10-pound bass into Cerritos Regional, Alondra Park, you know, and that, you know, it really wasn't kosher, but, you know, I knew that if you put them in there, and, you know, there'd be a network of kids that were starting to chase these fish, you know. And so it was fun because you need that, you know, so it was worth the risk. But that I did that because you know, not only that, when you have Floridas mixed with the northern strain, the first generation, that's the fish that grew those super big fish that we were chasing at Castaic, Casitas, you know.
You know,
So,
guys,
yeah, that's
I
cool.
really think Mark's onto something though, but how many times do you look at a couple or of adults and you're in a restaurant, they're sitting across from one another, what are they doing? They're on their phone. They're not communicating. And what about communication skills? That's got to be just going down the drain, Scott. Do you see that as a teacher?
Yes. We have to teach all these things. So I just gave my boys' soccer program a grade check, and I have to teach them how to go and ask the teacher, because otherwise they'll just walk up and like shove it in their face. And I'm like, no, guys, you're going to say, hey, and you're not going to do it during class. You know, like these types of things need to be taught. We're dealing with different kids now, and we can either yell at them for being different or we can help them, and they need help. In a lot of
good
ways.
Take. Such a good take. Yeah.
All right, Mark says fishing teaches lifelong lessons and creates unforgettable memories. Keep doing the good work. Mark left a couple of fish out here. We have to arm wrestle. There's only two, so there's three of us. So we'll see. Mark is also, we need to put an age limit to phones and electronic devices, 18 before you can own a phone. You know, I know a lot of parents that won't let their kids anywhere near an iPhone or anything else until they're 18, until they're adults. They're not equipped to handle it.
You can get into too much trouble. There's too many things that they
Yes,
get
that
into.
too.
Yeah.
There's a balance though, because we have to prepare these kids for a world that it's going to be on computers, right? And if we simply say no till you're 18, those years of development, now all of a sudden you're 18 and you're like, here's your first computer or phone, now they're behind, right? So
Yeah,
there
they're like
just
me
needs
with
to
a
be,
phone.
yeah, they're like me when the kid has to come up and say, no, you want to do this kind of thing, right? So
Right.
there has to be a balance, and there's ways to do it. The limits are there. You can easily limit these things.
Rick
Good
Slater,
deal.
I don't know who he's asking this to. Does he have his own kids or fairy shrimp? Question mark. Does anybody know what that means? I
No.
don't.
You're going to have to elaborate a
yeah,
little
I
yeah.
can
bit.
say I have
So,
my own kids.
I have my own kids, yeah.
Well, and I think maybe what
inherited
he's getting
some,
to
too.
is if you have kids today, the struggle for a parent to say no, right? Because everybody has one of these, and it's actually good for some of the parents because you can call your kid and you can find them. Again, we're trying to talk about common sense solutions, right? Like, but there has to just be limits. And I get it, for a lot of parents, it's a struggle. I was in our office the other day and there was this baby that was crying, screaming, and the secretary goes, bring her over here. She gave her the phone and there's this baby app, and it just mesmerized the child. And I was like, whoa,
Holy
that
smokes.
is, and you could see as a parent though, there'd be a time where you're like, I'm done with this kid crying, give it the phone, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, right.
if that's what he was talking about
Wow.
in that comment, I do understand that. I always tell people that I get 200 new kids every year. So those are my students, but not any of my own.
All right, Brandon, aka the Corpse, says, I feel much more comfortable if my kids had a phone in case of an emergency or something like that. They should have access to one. With how crazy this world is now, Phil, you can have a phone to call 911 and not see porn. This is the
Yeah.
balance that you're talking
gonna have-
about.
yeah.
You can have a phone that allows you to communicate with your parents, but not get into stuff that a 12-year-old kid is not equipped
Yeah, they
to
have
handle.
access to that. That's got to be, I think, it's got to be instated by the parents. They have to lay the groundwork down.
It's parent, and you know, we were starting to see this become political too, right? That the federal government, state governments are thinking. You just saw, was it Montana? Am I getting that state wrong? That just banned TikTok. But even if you look at China, their TikTok only allows their kids on for a half an hour, 45 minutes a day, and all of the things on TikTok are just educational, whereas our kids are being given 24 hours of access, and they're giving access to anything and everything.
Yeah,
So
it's all crap.
there are limits that we can do, common sense stuff.
Scott, I don't know if you know, I taught for 3 years in China.
Yeah.
We're screwed. Those kids
Oh,
they're actually studying things that are going to make their life better. And when they get through with 10 hours of school, they go to do the violin, practice violin for 2 hours. And you're right, their TikTok is totally different. The parenting over there is way more strict and involved tiger moms and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Now, I'm not actually for that either, because, like, to me, I don't give homework in my class, and I tell them your job is to go play after school. Whether it's at a park with your friends shooting hoops, whether you're meeting on a hike, whether you're supposed to be exploring life. Like, we can cover whatever we need to in the hour and a half. Like, I'm going to make you a better reader, writer, presenter, all of that. My deal with you is that the homework that you have is to go and explore, but are they doing that?
right, and
right here.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I had that argument with China. I go, will you let your kids just play for 30 seconds?
Yeah.
And they're not,
The research that's being done on play now and what comes out of it, like schools, like you could almost even argue that in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and I don't want to say get rid of reading and all that kind of stuff, but just let them play and watch them develop the negotiation skills, all that kind of social, emotional stuff.
Absolutely. All right, Fish from Worm King Swimbait says,
Ah.
you teach a kid to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Dan Smith, who's been contributing to this show really well. Phil, Scott, Danny, the three of you. I mean, we have teachers, a captain, and the three of you have great passion for children. The three of you make up a great rock-solid foundation to build on. Mark says that's the problem. The computer and the internet makes every user an instant genius in their own mind, and I'm sure it affects how they learn at school. Man, I mean, like this AI stuff now, like, you know, it's like you tell it to write your essay, and you got this great essay. There's no reason to do it anymore. Rick Slater, too woke for me, Bud Light promo. Don't know what he's talking about. Like, this is too woke? Mark says,
Fishing is too woke?
parents are the problem, not the kids. I concur 100%.
Yeah.
Gentlemen?
No.
It takes a village. And just from the teacher side, you know, like we want to be part of that village. And I think to bring it back to fishing, we want fishing to be part of the village. I want to drop my, you know, if I had a kid off on your boat, know that he's going to be taken care of for the day, you know, like that the village is going to kind of circle around this kid and bring him up. And again, like to speak to like being too woke, we brought this up because the kids don't have enough outlets. And so we're just arguing that fishing should be one of those outlets.
You know, there was a time years ago where parents were able to drop off their kids, and they used to call them pinheads. But, you know, by law, they changed the laws, and they ended a lot of that. In fact, the last pinhead that we had, well, I call him a pinhead because he couldn't drive down to the boat. You probably know who he is. It was Brian K. O'Hara, the American angler, and you could see what Brian built over time because of his passion, his astuteness in understanding what the business was about, and having a superb level of, you know, his personality and you know the way he treated his customers, and you know his fishing ability. The whole it's the whole 9 yards to upscale the operation to that level, you know. And unfortunately, that was taken away from us. There's no longer what we call the pinhead program, where you grow them from, you know, you raise it from the young age up. But he's really the epitome of that, you know. We took an operation to the top where I actually had to tell Brian, I says, you know what, let Ray run the boat, you know, because Brian would call me up to the warehouse and say, hey, what do you think about this and this and this? You know, Brian, you see all this stuff in here? It never existed when I was around. I don't know squat, you know, compared to you. And he would put too much pressure on himself. And I said, Brian, you're the best. I know that. I don't need to let Ray run the boat. And now Ray's at that stage. And, you know, it's going to, I'm sure that's going to keep carrying forward, you know, with that. Because that's what it does. You know, drives the kids from your younger kids up. And when you're brought up, and it's like anything, as you're mentored in an environment where it's clean and you got, you know, you're very strict with the way you do things, and it's done our way, you know, and you don't veer from it. You run a very professional operation, you know, it becomes generational too.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And that next generation
Yep.
is the question mark.
Absolutely.
Steve Bermudez agrees with Mark. Parents are the problem. Alan R., the irony of social media and heavy schoolwork is it makes kids antisocial. Fishing can be a great metaphor for life. Get out and teach kids to fish.
Love it.
Brandon, can you ask the teacher, Phil, why am I using APA format in college and also MLA format? Why do we have to know both these writing formats? A little inside baseball there.
I feel like he's one of my students. Yeah, so I actually went to a school. My college was MLA, and then my master's program was APA. So yes, why do we need to know both?
You want to explain what that is to people that don't know?
Yeah, I don't know if we need to do it on Fishing Store. It's just a writing style. So like MLA is a writing style that has these certain kind of rules. And then if you're going to write your thesis paper in another college that demands APA, that's a different type of rule. And so, yeah, I was pretty angry when I went to get to my master's and found out I now needed to learn a new writing style other than MLA.
Oh, they moved the goalposts.
Totally.
Steve Bermudez says the Daniel Hernandez Youth Foundation has a great fishing program, but we need dedicated volunteers.
And I think volunteering is another thing that is an easy way in. I'm staff pro for Iserline. We do a lot of events where we're tying knots at a lot of kids' events and all those sorts of things. CCA, I just decided one day I wasn't doing enough, and I made a phone call, and now on the board of CCA Orange County. So there are organizations like that one, like ours, that do need volunteers and people to help out. And yeah, run these kind of kid drives that we need going.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're working with Wayne, CCA?
Yes.
My
So Wayne is my,
doppelganger?
yeah, Wayne is the big boss. We see Chris a lot more than we see
Yeah.
Wayne at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
but yeah, we all the big shows and
That's
stuff
funny.
like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, cool.
We're good, or you guys want to keep going? Or?
Oh yeah, but well, Scott, what else? I know we're missing things.
Mark says,
Yeah.
until we can make people social again, your efforts and words are being wasted, except for the few that we could reach and disconnect.
I don't think they're wasted because effort is always, because we have the ability to save this. I mean, there are fishing camps happening. There's last year when I ran mine, my school one in the summertime, I had at least 10 teachers reach out to me and say, show me how to do that. Like, what was your day one, day two? How did you get these organizations? Yes, we can build a model and repeat it every single school and offer those kind of things. And even if it's 30 kids at a time, it's not wasted for me because the kids that I exposed it to last year, so they have to turn in an application coming up for my camp coming up. Every kid that was in it last year has come by in the last couple of weeks and said, hey, when is it due? And I feel bad because I want a new 30, right? But the last 30 are all excited to go, right? So we can do it 30 kids at a time.
That's really interesting because I think we may have the ability to do something like that and to get that funded. And I'll have to work on that because we've had the commitment from a few people, and it was more in line of training them into captains via for down the road for vocational use too. In doing so, they could be trained on sport boats and everything. And I would go with I would put them on boats that I consider credible. And I'm very strict about what I mandate as far as zero tolerances and things like that. So these are things that maybe we can implement. I'm going to work on that.
Well,
to
and
see if we can get
ultimately that
programs
rabbit
get
hole that we started with, right?
Yeah.
Like the passion that makes you, like you expose somebody and okay, one kid, it's just a hobby, but that hobby saves them for the rest, because this is something, it's the carrot for a while, but then it's the thing that they do when they're, and then for another kid, it's the rabbit hole that leads to a job. And for another kid, it's, Bob Vierrigger, who's a captain here, he's one of my ex-students. So I see students of mine all the time out here. So
that's kind of gratifying.
We have a chance. And really, when we think about education, if we're not preparing them for a job or at least showing them some jobs that are out there, like the kind of program you're talking about, why not?
Exactly.
Hey, Blue Sky says, well, how about people donating their unused reels and rods? I have a couple I'm willing to donate right away.
And I think places because Friends of Rollo does a sale, right, where they take in stuff and all that money goes to take kids fishing. So there's a ton of places already out there that you could, and that money goes straight to, as I told you earlier, I just got a grant from Friends of Rollo so that money goes to taking kids fishing.
We just got a grant from Fish at Worm King, $10. You're the man,
bless
Fish.
you, Fish.
He's the man. You got to see those Worm King lures there. Good. Isaac wants to know, what age kids do you take? I've got an 8 and a 6-year-old. Love to get them outside.
Now, if you're talking about my high school camp, it's just for my kids that are in my class this whole year. I teach in an ocean academy, so I've stumbled upon the perfect job. I get to teach U.S. history, and I get to talk about the ocean and how they're related, and I get to tell fish stories all the time. But there are fish camps for kids that young. I don't know exactly what the Dana Point one, how old they go to or things like that, but there are opportunities out there for kids that are 6 and 8.
Yeah, I mean, possibly have different tiers, different age levels, brackets. I mean, if you bracket them, chances are good that you have more of a bonding
cohesiveness
because
6
they're all
to
the
8s
same
one
age.
day, all the 10s one day, all the 10s.
Right.
Because that's the
And
other
then
thing,
maybe
right,
have
is making friends inside of that.
That's
And
another
those
thing.
become your buddies that you're getting on bikes and going to the lake
To the
with.
park. Yeah, exactly.
Guys,
I
this
think
is
that's
such
really
an
good.
important and great conversation
absolutely.
you brought up tonight.
Absolutely.
Good job. All right, Fish Guy says, part of the problem is kids have to worry about being judged by their peers on social media en masse instead of just being kids in their formative years. Just better to go fishing.
I'm so glad I didn't get raised at a time where all of that kind of stuff was going on. We had pure childhoods because it wasn't all being filmed and photographed, and we would have made a lot of mistakes that would have been pointed out on social media forever.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right about that. But the whole driving thing, even for myself, was fishing.
Yeah.
You know, my love for fishing exceeded my love for getting in trouble and goofing around and everything else. So, you know, they hung my grades over it. The grades, the level of grades was the level of the trip. You're going on a half day, you're going on a 3/4, you're going on a full day trip overnight. You
I
know,
love it.
But I mean, it drove me to the point where my dad regretted it. But when I got out of college, and I had 2 job offers, and he asked me which one do you take. I said neither of them, and both those probably would have retired me in my, at least by the late 30s, right? By the way it worked out, and I chose going to work as a deckhand on a sport fishing boat.
Much happier.
For Taka, you know.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've never looked back. I never regretted any of that because I got to do what I wanted to do. It was my passion. I didn't even consider it work. And then the other thing was because I was, so in love with my fishing, the innovation, and you're yearning for learning, like you said, it never stops. It never stops.
You don't want a passion or a hobby that doesn't have a rabbit hole. You want one that goes all the way, that never ends, because this thing, every time you think you have something figured out, you'll meet a guy that's gone way further than you, and you're like, whoa, I didn't even think about going down that rabbit hole. And so it's a never ending, you can never do enough research, you can never, and there's more to learn, and the whole planet and different fish. This is a good rabbit hole.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why we want to expose this to as many kids as possible.
You're right. Absolutely. There's no end to it. I
Yeah.
mean, because like within fishing, once you get to a certain point, then you might go off and really do some exotic traveling. Like with Steve, you told me, I got to go down to Guyana and Brazil. I never in my
I went to Brazil with Howard Hatta.
There you go. See, I mean, and that messes you up, right? You get that blow up on a spook or, like as wood choppers,
Yep.
and stuff
Yep.
like that. It'll mess you up forever,
Yeah.
How does that fish break 80-pound spectra? How, And think just the overall experience from that. But that sends you on a different, now in your head, what's next? Guyana with the Arapaima, this, that. You get these bucket lists all over the world now.
Well, and speaking, so I know way too many teachers that they retire and then what is their purpose in life? Because their purpose has been children their whole lives, and now at 61, 62, they don't have it. So even as adults, we need hobbies that we can go to. And I can't wait till I retire because I already have bucket list trips and bucket list fish. And I have a bunch of friends that don't know what they're going to do. They'll, they want to travel a little bit or that. But you need to be excited about life all the time, which means we need to give these kids lots of options as far as hobbies go so that they're excited about life.
100%. Scott, you nailed it.
Absolutely.
That's why you and I haven't retired,
Absolutely,
man.
exactly.
Well,
I
there's a
think-
famous phrase that
Yeah.
says if you love what you never
It's
work a
not
day in your
work.
life. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I feel. I enjoy spending time. I babysit my grandkids when I can, but if I can get people involved in fishing and change their lives,
Yeah. Well,
my
and
God, how gratifying is that?
I ask my kids a question too, because I try to circle around hobbies and rabbit holes and passions, like what is yours? And really, they need help finding it. And so I ask them, if you won $1 billion tomorrow, what would you do with the rest of your life? Like, what would you do with your life? Or if tomorrow was your last day on Earth, what would you do, right? Because then you start to think about I would spend the day taking pictures at the, okay, I think your hobby that you need to go down is photography or whatever it is, right? But they need direction in getting there and some exposure.
Absolutely.
All right, Brandon, how successful has CCA been fighting back these jerks in the California government? Sam talked about some stuff yesterday. What else do you need from us, California common people?
One, make sure you're a CCA member. That does help. The numbers help. And yeah, I think we have been successful. This year we got the 365-day license on our first try. A lot of people don't know that we almost lost sardines a couple years ago. It was CCA that saved sardines. They wanted to put bluefin tuna on the endangered fish list, and we were able to keep it to a limit of 2. So yeah, they have been pretty successful in doing the stuff that we'd like. The big fight right now is 30 by 30. I know people have gotten the word out about that, but we need all hands on deck for that one.
All right, hit that like button, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Great comments here so far today. Alan says, I do the same thing with my boys as Danny just mentioned. Effort in school earns trips on boats. It really motivates my boys.
I love it.
And it's a family deal too at that point too, which is even better.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because how strong is that? Keep getting your family strong together too. I mean, too often, one kid's here, one kid's they're off doing different things, but when you're all collectively on a vacation doing the same thing, you know, I don't think it gets any better than that.
No,
than
it
family.
doesn't. It doesn't.
Isaac says, Scott, I know what you're talking about. I've been in this rabbit hole for years. Michael Rittner.
Don't crawl out. Stay in. Go deeper. Go deeper.
Michael Rittner says, hi, Danny. My first experience fishing with you was with the Tanakas on the Mustang way back. Thank you.
Oh my God! Well, and once again, that was one of my blessings, and one of my greatest mentors was Taka, and you know, I could see it. You know, he was a very astute captain. You know, really paid attention to everything. You know, and that I was fortunate enough to wean under him. You know, and mentor under Taka, but and then I would see things like I'll give you a funny story. You know, on the boat, we'd always, when we hit the landing at H&M, we'd always grab a bunch of candies, take them on the boat. We all had places where we would stash them, you know. And so, like, I would constantly get into Steve Tanaka or Marty Tanaka's or whoever's candy, you know, and play the Yogi Bear, you know. And one time I got into a stash in Taka. It was Taka's stash, right? And I go, he had this huge bag. And I go, what? You know, and he said, hey, don't touch that. I said, okay, I didn't touch it. The next day, we're down the beach, down along the coastline. We're making squid off just above Ensenada there, Pescadero, I think. And this little panga would come out, and all these little children in the panga would come out. And Taka bought all this candy for the kids. So, you know, just the human side of what we do and how we've impacted people over the years. That's, again, once again, a great story from a great mentor, you know. But I was blessed to be tuteled under Taka. You know, he was the best, you know. And we had so many great times, and even, you know, we got off the Mustang and we went on to the lakes, and we became very competitive on the lakes. You know, we fished together a lot initially, and then we got our own boats, and we all had our own little different philosophies and stuff, but we were all very close. You know, a lot of great people were involved, the Corky Yokois and, you know, Butch Brown. I mean, you start thinking about some of these people that were, you know, were in the nucleus in that group, and they were all just great because that information line that went around to all of us, and if you look at who was involved, and it affected a lot of people that I'm even forgetting. I mean, could have been the Sanson brothers, Don and Danny we talked to. I talked to Ray Montero. So that also kind of helped integrate some of the fleet between the northern and the southern fleet too. So
It'd
you know,
be
it's a
cool
lot
to
of good
do
stuff.
the, you know, not a family tree, but the captain tree. Like, this was my deckhand, and now look at what he spawned. Like,
Oh
it,
yeah,
it
oh
would be
yeah,
cool
it would.
because that's the history that I love. You know, like-
Exactly. No, that's a great idea because there were so many that spun off. Like I said, Brian was the last pinhead. Yeah,
Well,
but I mean, there
and,
was.
and the other thing about this too, you know, when we think about our planet, our ocean, and all that kind of stuff, when we have these kids on the water, they will care more about the ocean and the animals that live in it and this planet that we're on,
Absolutely.
and they become steward. And so your example of him, you know, oh, these are for the kids. That's something ingrained in you. I'm gonna be a giver for
humanity
my life,
side.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we have these kids on the water, like, I'm gonna take care of this resource because ultimately, we care more than anybody. You know, as much as fishermen get bagged on for, well, actually, we're the ones that want it to be saved.
You know, Scott, I mean, you couldn't say it any better. I can remember one of my first trips down to Brazil. You go in, you're flying into these impoverished villages, right? Deep in the heart of the jungle, you land on a dirt field, and you see little kids running around, you know. So the next year, I remember taking down, as part of my daughters had so much clothes, a lot of it still had tags on it. And I brought down tons, just like what Phil does, all the time down to Mexico. But we took some stuff, you know,
Good job, Danny.
took clothing for kids to the villages, right? And They just went nuts.
So Phil might
That's
not
so
remember this,
great.
but at Fred Hall one year, I knew he was looking for donations, and I ran this soccer program, and so I brought all the jerseys from that year
I do remember
and
that.
handed him
Yeah.
that. And so I've told him a couple times, I'm like, one day, because I used to have a house in Ensenada, I told him, I'm like, one day I want to see,
Yeah,
the
that's
high
right.
school's
Oh, there you
name
go.
just
Oh,
running
my
around
God.
it, like that'll be the end, because obviously these jerseys went somewhere, and hopefully
Yeah,
they got
yeah.
used the
Oh,
way
my
that
God, that's awesome.
we would want them to. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And my girls knew about that too, like we're going to pass these forward. And we hope that somebody else, because, yeah, these are the lessons and the things that the kids need.
You can't say any better than that. I mean, this is what makes this and why we're in this sport too. I mean, not just for the fishing part of it, but a lot of the fringe things, the way we impact, a lot of the, the people, other people that we deal with, and communities that we go into, and destinations and things like that. I mean, it's valuable.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think this industry has been super charitable, and that's why I think we could get everybody on board with, like, let's save these kids and let's give them the hobby of fishing, and a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely.
Rick Slater says, hit that like button. Dan Smith says, what a great show. And you know what? This is unlike any show we've done. It is about fishing, but it's about what's going on in our communities right now. It's a great show,
Absolutely,
Danny.
absolutely.
Really good. Alan R. Both of my boys chose marine science as an elective in high school because of fishing. When they're on a boat, they can actually talk with the other fishermen. Fishing can be a good core for everything. Absolutely, right, guys?
Well, and because you don't care what your kids are learning about, like you want them to go into that rabbit hole because that's when you're getting all the fissures in the brain. So if this is the thing that they go into, cool. Like it doesn't mean that they're going to become a fisherman when they grow up or a captain, but they're going to take that knowledge, those skills, the problem solving, all of that into another industry. Love it. I wonder what school they're going to, Alan R.
Having the marine science, that's huge, and I like that because I know my brother deals with that because the Outer Limits has a contract with the government as far as doing studies like on the cowcott studies. They put the decompression chamber on so they can decompress a cowcott. Before you bring a cowcott up, it blows. What do? You take a knife and you got to pop it's not good, right? Now they can decompress it, tag the fish, put a tracking unit on it, and release it, and it can go down. Or you could.
I
put
was
it
on
at
all
sea
those
level.
trips that we had several different descending devices, and the scientists would come up behind us, and this is when science and fishing gets cool, and we get together like this. I do the calico tagging trips every single
Yeah.
year, but the calico stuff. So we'd catch a rock cod, the scientists would come up and time it, and you'd be on whatever descending device, and they would time you, and at the end of it, we had to fill out which descending device was the best, which one was the easiest, all of that kind of stuff. And when we did catch a cow cod, we would drop the transponders and everything so that they could triangulate and find out where that fish was and going. Cool stuff.
You
Bravo,
put
boys.
tracking units on it?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, see, now on the Outer Limits, they have a decompression chamber. So they literally put it in there, and you don't need to do anything else.
Wow.
It just goes right back down. But through that, and I've mentioned this in the past, folks, how can you institute regulations and rules on a cowcott when we don't know what they do?
Yeah.
We had no idea that this fish, when you put it back on the 43, and I've mentioned this once before too, I would conceive of being a fisherman and we use commercial rock cut fish, for, sport fishing style with rod and reels. But if you caught a cow, you look at the site, you look at a cow, kind of looks like I am now, I'm not into any wind sprints, I'm not going to run the mile,
By the way,
how
I
far are
didn't
you
even
going?
know they got big because I'm not from the time period where cow cod
Oh, yeah.
Wayne Allen sent me a picture a couple nights ago of he was holding a 20-pounder,
yeah.
and I'm like, oh my God.
We used to get them and they just blow, once they started to descend, they would just shoot to the surface and they float 10-pound weights. That's how much buoyancy they had. But until that decompression chamber, you look at a cow and its shape, and it's not like an albacore or tuna where you think it's going to travel great distances. So if you catch it on the 43, you might suspect that it's on the east end of Clemente, maybe the 60-mile bank on the outside, maybe Tanner Cortez at the very outside. But a week later, that fish was tracked outside Conception. So here's my problem in dealing with biologists. obviously they're there to drum up, grant money. But my problem is if we don't know that as fishermen, as much as we've been involved, and we're starting to see cows in 30 fathoms, what do you mean? What does that mean? Well, common sense is telling me that they're so populated they're now coming into shallow water in search of food too. So not knowing that, and not knowing that in 1 week they could be outside conception from the 43, how could you possibly make judgments and rulings and legislation on a fish that you know nothing about?
But it's why the fishermen belong in all this science.
That's right. That's exactly it. Because we bring the common sense to it.
Yeah.
And being a fisherman, we've dealt with it, But now, thanks to the decompression chambers and everything, we have the proof to tell them, well, obviously, you're making these, conjectures, based on what you think as a biologist. And I've dealt with, back in the Russ Eisner's days when we went up to UC Santa Barbara dealing with kids that are, had zero experience on the water, but they're responsible for grant monies and these programs that they're trying to institute. So I did have problems with that.
All right, Scott. Alan R. says University High School in Irvine. You wanted to know where his kids were
Nice.
going.
That's close to me. Cool.
All right, Brandon. Yeah, it's true, Danny and Phil. It's not every day you get to talk to someone who's fighting for our fishing rights against the politicians. If I had the job, I'd be in jail because I'm mad against them. Calm down, Brandon. That's not going to solve anything. Just be calm. Breathe deeply.
It's irritating though. I used to fish Laguna with Decker a lot, and they closed that stretch of Laguna, and that was some of my favorite calico fishing, period. And losing that, or losing the area in front of, oh gosh, what's the name of the hotel up there, that Benny used to fish, like those were some of my favorite fishing grounds, and they closed.
Like the Ritz-Carlton area? What,
No, it'll come to me in a second.
Okay.
Terranea.
Terranea.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right up here.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I get the anger because
I get it too.
Yeah.
Steve Din, I caught a kelp cod on my last trip. It would definitely have gotten the jackpot over the ling cod. Naughty Boy 78, how do you guys feel about venting fish?
Are we talking about poking holes? And
I think, right?
yeah, so
Is that what you're talking about, Naughty Boy?
I think that the science shows us, because there can be infections and things
Right.
like that happen,
Right.
that the science shows us that with a descending device that you're have a better chance of that fish living and making
Yeah,
it.
the decompression, I think, is, but yeah, exactly. You don't
Yeah.
have the infections or anything else. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd do well. I mean, put a knife in me and say, okay, we'll take the air out of you.
Yeah, and thinking about our coast right now, so our coast has 16% of the coast is closed already. So if 30 by 30, they want to close it another 14%. And part of it, when you look at the calico studies that are being done, the reason that you're going to close it is so that they said there's going to be spillage. But if you look at the tagging study on calicos, there's no spillage. Like you don't tag one here and catch that, 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles, that you catch it again right there. And so if there is no spillage, then
What's the point?
yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, I got to tell you, I mean, being involved with Russ Eisner in those old days, he would just pull me aside. This is what we're going to do, Danny. So we go to Clemente, and we would catch hundreds of legals, short. I can remember in El Nino, right after El Nino, when the kelp all died, we came back, and because Russ said by the time Fish and Game finally approved this thing, it'd be all over. So we were bringing back hundreds of legal and short calicos. Now, we would have been in trouble if we had, but you know what? Once again, the man was just way ahead of his time. He was like that with all his political decisions. And at the time, I was wrong because I said, Russ, when we had our radio show, I said, I don't think they want to talk about politics and everything. They want to talk about fishing. And that was what's going on in my head.
Right.
But he was right, and I was wrong. We needed to address a lot of that. And because he was the way he was, we have Eisner's Reef.
Yep.
That idea, when they tore down the viaduct, which was right here, all that concrete, he gave it to Fish and Game, and they boo-hooed it. So he funded it himself to put it on that barge, and now that place, how many years later is this? It's its own ecosystem.
It is one of the things California needs to do a much better job at. Like, it takes way too long and way too much money to put a rock down.
Exactly.
And if we're losing habitat for these fish, and I think this CCA, this will be an arm that we kind of once 30-30 that we can start to really think about. Because in Texas and Louisiana, they're putting these, you watch videos of these guys dropping them all the time, right? And we can't do it here, and we should. Speaking of the kelp dying, a lot of kelp off our coast died, and you can go fish calicos in places you haven't been to in a long, long time. So if you like fishing calicos tight to the beach right now,
Fish the hard bottom. Yeah.
All right, Brandon is asking some really interesting questions tonight. Very entertaining. Are they planning any new sneaky stuff next time CCA and government meet? Anything us fishermen should be aware of, Scott?
Yeah, 30 by 30 is the big push right now, and fighting that every way we can and educating the people. This year, because we work the membership, I worked at PCS Show, people were walking up, I'm in. And usually it's like, you're selling and you're having to teach people about this, but so many of the industry people are talking about 30 by 30, and everybody says, okay, well, what do I do? CCA. And so we got a lot more memberships that way. People were actually going into the show, because we had a deal where if you bought your package, you got to get, people were coming out, and even though they'd already been in, we're buying the package on the way out, because we got to unify fishermen. Teach them about CCA. They have to know that what it's doing, but that it's going to be here, and that they are being successful in fighting this stuff. So 30 by 30 is our current fight.
All right, Alan wants to know where you teach, Scott.
Yeah, I was like, I teach at Long Beach Unified, so I was not wanting to mention the school. Just, I don't know if that's legality of kids or something like that.
All right, Naughty Boy, he was talking about poking holes with a hollow needle.
Yeah.
All right, Dan Smith, Danny, Scott, Phil. When I was fishing on the seiners for Bumblebee, right next door was a company called Kelpco. Do you remember the kelp cutters? I do remember.
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
Do you know what effect that had for our local fishing, Danny?
Not really. I mean, they would do a pretty good job of thinning, but the kelp grows so fast.
Yes, it does.
I don't know what the long-term effect had, but I remember the Kelco boats, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can harvest that stuff pretty successfully, and it grows back pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't think, as long as you're not pulling up the rooting systems, I think it comes back really fast. I forget how many inches a day they grow, but it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, I used to know. I was going to say like a foot per something,
Yeah,
but I don't want to say the wrong
it
information.
grows
on here.
fast.
Yeah,
it grows
does.
fast. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're waiting. We're just looking. Well, we don't have our man here pulling the stuff up. But
What are we going to do without him? We're in trouble now.
Help, Phil!
Yeah.
Oh, my
let's
God.
see. CCA. Yeah, guys, if you haven't joined, do so. This is a group that's been here for a while. Running the Instagram and the Facebook, I still get people, hey, who are you? What are you doing? All that kind of stuff. We are the guy that is fighting for your right to fish. But we're also doing things like the white sea bass hatchery programs, the halibut hatchery programs that are joining that now. We did get the 365 license. So it's fully fighting for your right to fish, and there's no reason not to join. I think it's a $35 membership right now. And one, the number helps to show them how many people we have, but two, that $35 goes to fighting for our fishing rights in California.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep.
And there's some banquets coming up. I don't know about Warren. I think that's the LA chapter.
Yeah,
May
so
the 20th,
they
right?
have a barbecue coming up. I know there's a golf tournament coming up. I know my chapter, we are in, is that October? So Orange County has a golf tournament, and we need two things. One, we need foursomes to sign up. And the second thing is we need hole sponsors. So if you have a business, want to get involved, sponsor a hole, you can do something really cool. You can make a fishing game at the thing. People had drinking games on holes last year, so you can definitely get your business involved with that. But secondly, if you're a golfer, why not get a foursome together, support CCA, come out and golf, have a fun day, and also put money where it needs to be fighting for our rights to fish.
All right, Scott, is the CCA, this is Brandon again, is the CCA doing anything about those darn sea lions? They are such a nuisance and dangerous at times. Is CCA doing anything to combat those pesky darn things and neuter them or something? Brandon's on a roll tonight.
Other than lead poisoning, which you can't do. I'm sorry I mentioned that, but yeah, it gets to be a real pain.
That's kind of a thing that it's part of the game now.
Yeah, at CCA,
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything in that regard, so I can't speak to that.
I mean, to be perfectly politically honest, I think that would turn a lot of the pub. I mean, there's other battles to fight.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Steve Dean says it's $40.
My bad. Yeah,
it's
I think we're at
40 now. I
35.
signed
Yeah.
up last week at the Fishers of Men.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Dan Smith, money well spent. Brett Enter. I would be interested in a whole sponsor. Brett is he's a great guy. I fished with him on the Relentless, his father, his brother. You should get a hold of Scott,
Okay.
Brett.
Yeah, you can find me at CCA Orange County on Instagram, or you can email CCA if you want, Wayne, or you can find me on Facebook either through Scott Manson or through the CCA Orange County chapter or any of the chapters, and we'll be able to find you. So yeah, that'd be great.
Look at that, Danny. We just
Yeah.
sold a hole.
Yeah.
Beautimus.
Yeah, I love it. Anything else, guys? Or
No, what do you think, Scott? We're good.
I think we're good. Save our history of the sport fishing.
Yeah.
Hopefully that Taddy book is something you guys
Oh.
are going to be interested in.
Scott, is there any pre-order or is
No,
there a
there-
website?
no,
or
nothing
can
right now.
anybody-
Yeah,
okay.
in fact, this is kind of the first time anybody besides,
Hey,
yeah,
breaking
this is
news,
Well,
Danny.
so
this
here's the
is-
thing too, Scott. What we'll do is we'll call Joey and Phil. You and I will go down there to film all the stuff too, because I want Phil to take a look at the mini museum too.
Yeah, yeah.
We go through little pieces. There is a lot of history there. Like I
It
said,
is.
my grandpa's old reel do. Well, how many people knew about 2-speeds back in those days?
No.
But I mean, it's that Southern Cal mindset again. Once again, way ahead of the rest of way ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Brett says he's going to get in touch with you, and he also has some great ideas about kids. So
Awesome.
He can discuss that with you, Scott.
And I love the idea whoever said, why doesn't CCA have a youth chapter in each
that was
chapter?
Dan Smith.
Yeah, so that's another thing that we're going to have to bring up at our next meeting and get that going. Let's see. Take a kid fishing. If you don't have any kids, volunteer with one of these organizations that are out there. Donate to those guys. Some of you guys talked about you had used tackle. Why not give it to Friends of Rollo? They will sell it. That money goes to taking a kid fishing. Our kids need help, and I think fishing is something that can help them.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
one thing that went on here this evening also, sometimes these shows like get cliquey and they don't talk about other people and blah, blah, blah. We've talked about everybody because we need to be a united group
Yeah.
here.
Absolutely.
So no matter who it is out there, they're all trying to do the other podcasts, the other radio shows. We're all in this together. And you've done a great job of bringing
Thank you.
that all together.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Anything else, guys?
No,
You want to
awesome,
wrap it up by
Scott.
saying anything?
Thank you, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, you got it. You got it. We're not done yet.
Okay.
All right, Dan Smith says 100%. You guys had a lot of people watching, and I was observing out here. Great show. A lot of great information. Got into a lot of great stuff.
Awesome.
All right, you guys can say goodbye, and then I'll
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Thanks for watching.